Rosie. Good morning, everybody. First, I just want to say happy spring. So I know some of you are very sad that football is over, but there's an old adage in real estate that the spring market begins the Monday after Super Bowl Sunday. So we are officially there, and I think gearing up for a good first quarter. So may not feel like it weather-wise as I'm sitting here in my dark office, but we are officially ready, I think, to roll for 2025. Also want to say welcome to our new people. We had a great week of new agent training last week. It was one of our largest groups we've ever had go through that program. And I know a handful of those folks are on the call this morning. So welcome. If you are not one of those new people, please, do what you can to reach out and make them feel welcome. We appreciate that. So, and before I get into my super exciting content, I also want to just do a plug for next week's monthly meeting. So our February meeting, not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow. We do have a great virtual option now for those of you who are not in Indy, or even if you're in Indy and it's just easier for you to attend virtually. So we'll be hosting that in our new meeting space, which is adjacent to our Broad Ripple office. We have shifted the time. It's going to be at 10 a.m. on Thursday morning. And this month, we are featuring some super talented and experienced members of our brokerage when it comes to listing agents. So we have a panel that's going to feature Kathy Russell, Robin Brees, and Emily Burford. And they're going to be talking about basically how to get your listings sold. I'm taking a lot of phone calls on a regular basis about listings that are sitting and folks not sure of what to do and strategies to help those listings move and how to reassure their sellers and so forth. So we're going to spend our time talking about that with these three of your coworkers who have lots of listing experience. I think it'll be well worth your time. So that's next Thursday, 10 a.m. in Broad Ripple or virtually. Okay. So I want to take a minute today. Some of you are going to be like, oh my gosh, Megan, I know this stuff, but I do get a lot of questions about the rules, if you will. Thank you, Rosie, for entering listings into the MLS or BLC. And so I want to take a minute to just go over this again. There seems to be some confusion floating around. Basically, the rules that we are bound by, they're coming from two different places. So the first is the MLS or BLC rules that you all have agreed to by being a member of the multiple listing service or the BLC, depending if you're with IRMLS or with MyBOR. And those rules basically say that from the effective date of the listing contract, for MyBOR, you have 2 business days to get that listing entered into the BLC. And for IRMLS, it's 3 calendar days, excluding holidays, to have that listing entered, up and running, and active in your MLS. And the effective date is typically that start date that's on, I think it's line 9 of our listing contract, top of page 1, or the date that the seller signs it in the event that the seller signs it later than the effective date, right? So whatever date you have identified as the start date of the contract on page 1, or the date it's signed, whichever's later, you then have either 2 business days or 3 calendar days, depending on your MLS, to have it entered and active. The other rule that governs this is the clear cooperation rule that is coming from, that's a policy that came from NAR. It was adopted in 2020. And that rule says that from the minute you start to publicly market a property, you have 24 hours basically, or 1 day, to get that listing up and running in your respective MLS. So I get a lot of questions about that. Public marketing is public marketing, right? So that's a sign in the yard, that is social media, that is any kind of mailing or communication that's going out to the broader public. That does kick that clear cooperation rule into play, and then you then have a day to basically get that listing into the MLS. And of course, you would need a corresponding listing contract before you could enter it into the MLS. The goal of clear cooperation was to prevent pocket listings and off-market deals. It's really to promote competition. If you pay attention to real estate news, you know that clear cooperation is under a little fire right now. And so this could all change, but right now that is still the rule that you have agreed to abide by, that you will follow that follow that rule. So really what I want to talk about is what your options are. So if I meet with a seller today and they're ready to sign a contract, but they want to paint a bedroom and clean the house and stage, and we need to get photos, both MLSs do offer you a pre-marketing or a coming soon option. And I think it's very underused in our marketplace, but it is an option for you. So if I have a seller that signs a contract today and they're going to be ready to go on the market March 1st, I can enter that listing. Again, in MyBOR, it's called pre-marketing. In IRMLS, it's called listing coming soon status. And all of a sudden, I am allowed now to completely market that property. I can put a sign in the yard. I can talk about it on social media. What I can't do is show it. So you can't show it until it's a full active listing to anybody. That includes other brokers, even if their buyers aren't present. And the way we define showing is basically anybody crossing that threshold and entering the house. So you are bound by that rule, but it does allow you to put that coming soon sign in the yard and begin to talk about it in those weeks before the listing is ready to be active and available for showings. And it protects you as the listing agent in that time period because you're in a contract with that seller. So if someone shows up with a suitcase of cash on their front door, that's the example I always use because wouldn't that be cool? You still have a contract with that seller at that point, even if it hasn't fully gone active yet. So with MyBOR, there's no additional form needed. You just choose that status when you enter the listing. With IRMLS, there is a authorization form you do have to have the seller sign just to make sure they understand what you're doing. But I think the biggest point of confusion is days on market, and days on market do not accrue in this status. So your days on market do not accrue until the listing is active. The listing isn't sent out to anybody who has an active search until it becomes active. And when it is sent out, it does go out as a new listing. But I'll use, I drove past Emily Burford's listing on College every day last week to go to new agent training with her big coming soon sign. If I wanted to find more information about that, I could have gotten into the BLC and searched based on where it was on College Avenue, and I would have been able to at least access the information. So again, trying to provide equal access of the listing information to all the members of the listing service. I think that's it. I think that's basically what I wanted to cover. I'm going to there's a great link that I use a lot. It's a listing status, like just a chart for MyBOR, and it kind of talks about what paperwork's required and days on the market. I'm going to throw that in the chat here in a minute. Again, if you have any questions, I just would encourage you to reach out and ask. We don't want you to get fined or be caught in violation of the rules. And so just want to make sure everybody understands sort of what those guidelines are. Oh, how long can a listing be in pre-market, Lisa? That's a great question. So the system will, when you enter it, it will only allow you to put it in pre-market for 30 days. However, if I get to day 28 and my seller's not ready, I can go in and bump that date out further. A very important point to note though, is that it will set to automatically become active on whatever date you enter as the active date. And once it goes active, you can't go back to pre-market. So you do want to make sure you're watching that date. You can keep kicking it down the calendar, if you will. But once it goes active, you can't go backwards to pre-market. So are there any other questions about this? Cool. That's all I have today, Mark. I will throw it over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Megan. Morning, everybody. Quick comment there on what Megan was sharing at the end of her time about clear cooperation. We've chatted about this a little bit on this call. I think it's safe to say that the current system that our MLSs are using to enforce clear cooperation has worked to some extent. And I would say it hasn't worked to another extent in that the market hasn't really truly adopted the methods that are there to market a property, be it office exclusives or pre-markets. For example, right now in the MyBOR MLS, there's a little over 5,000 active listings. I just checked this morning. There's 49 pre-markets, meaning like less than 1% of homes that are like out there in the MLS are pre-market. And I think I've shared this. I happen to sit on the MLS board in MyBOR right now, and this is an issue that's getting talked about a lot, not just in our board, but around the country. I think there's some good solutions coming that accomplish most of what Clear Cooperation was intended to accomplish. So I know this is, for the majority of you, I don't think this is a big deal. I know for some of you in the company, this has been a point of frustration, both in the fact that it feels like it's just changed a lot, but also you feel like right now there are good options for your clients as sellers that you can't pursue. I'll just say two things. One, to echo what Megan said, I think there are ways to accomplish the majority of what your sellers want to accomplish off market, still within the rules. Give Megan a call, just brainstorm through what is it that they're trying to do? How could you accomplish that within the rules? And then number two, I think be encouraged that there is going to be some change to this in the near future. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's going to come at the national, state, local levels, but it is for sure coming. So, okay, I'm going to transition. I'm going to take a look at one screenshot of an article that stood out to me this week. Let you all take a look at that and get your reactions to it. We're not going to spend a ton of time on that, but I do want to look at it. And then we're going to transition to looking at some commission data. We now have 6 months of data from when the settlement went into effect. As you can see, my 3-year-old is joining the call here. He's wanting to pop up, so I'll just let him join fully. Everybody say hi to Ryder. Say hi to you. There you go. Okay. First, I'm not even going to share this article, but I want you all to take a look at this headline. Just kind of a philosophical exercise in how we read news and information in our industry. Okay. Is that showing up for y'all? Is it big enough that you can read it? Here, I can zoom in. There we go. Okay, if you can take a look at that, take a look at that, but I'll read it out loud. 41 housing markets where inventory just tipped in favor of buyers. So it says among the nation's 200 largest housing markets, which is a pretty big number. That's getting into some markets that aren't that big. Among the nation's 200 largest housing markets, these 41 metro areas now have active inventory at or above 2019 pre-pandemic levels. This article came out after we talked about this last week, but if you remember from our call last week, this is very much what we talked about in terms of what's happening nationally with inventory. But what stands out to you about how they described this in the headline? Anybody want to unmute themselves and just say how it strikes them or what they noticed? You can also jump into the chat if you want.
I mean, maybe that it's talking about the pre-pandemic levels of 2019.
Yeah, I actually think, Stacy, you're spot on. I think there's an obvious reason why they would be talking about pre-pandemic. Obviously, 2020, everything since 20 changed a lot. But what was true about inventory levels in 2019?
we had more
They were-
inventory?
I mean, we had more inventory then than we do now, but it was still definitely a seller's market.
Yeah. I think this is actually a good article. I don't think it's misleading. I don't even mind the title, but even in the title, they didn't say 41 housing markets that just became buyer markets. They said tipped in favor of buyers. I just think it's an important illustration to remember what your reference point is when you're looking at data, right? So 1 out of every 5 of the 200 biggest markets have more housing inventory today than they did 6 years ago in 2019. Okay. That is good news. It's in line with what we talked about last week, where inventory nationally is moving up in almost every marketplace. But when you take a look at this, I still I continue to just hear like the dynamic of conversations as if there's kind of this correction, lots of price drops, inventory's going up quickly, but it's because that's just the sort of thing that gets attention. And yeah, if you look, so we looked at that national inventory number. If you go back into like 2015, and this is maybe a good way to look at the perspective, 2015 was considered a very healthy market, not slow, not a buyer's market, balanced at worst. And from 2015 to 2019, inventory had gone down. So 2019 in the moment felt like a very low inventory climate. So we're getting back to that. 1 out of every 5 of our biggest markets in the country are now back to their 2019 inventory levels or higher. But that still means even the majority of those 41 are sellers markets. And I know that it's this really weird set of expectations right now. I appreciate Megan, Megan reminded about a great panel that we have coming about what do you do about hard to sell listings, right? That's not a question we've been asking much in the last 5 years. Fair? And so it's this weird moment where we're having to ask questions about hard to sell listings that we haven't had to ask in a while. And yet, generally speaking, we're still in a seller's market that is low inventory. So it's all about reference point. Okay. I'm going to stop that and I'm going to share an Excel spreadsheet that you guys have seen before. Okay. Oops, that's not going to work. Is that large enough? Can y'all see that? Good. Okay. Okay, there's a lot of numbers here. Real quick, I'm going to tell you what you're looking at and then what's relevant about this. So we've looked at this basically once a month since August. So I have put together, our friends at Security Title have helped me put together 2 different sets of numbers going back all the way to June. We did June and July to have a reference point from before the settlement would have taken effect. The main idea of this was I wanted you all to have real data on what was happening with commissions, particularly commissions on the buy side of a transaction, right? One of the key concerns about the settlement was if buyers agents have to have the compensation conversation with their buyers, there's now this new negotiation that's happening, and for sure this is going to drive commissions down, right? Like that was, it's a reasonable concern that was definitely out there. And so we asked Security sends me a report every month that usually has between 100 and 150 transactions detailed, so that I don't have the agents' names. I don't know who's charging what, but I can compile information on deals that none of our agents were involved in to look at, okay, what is being charged on the listing side, what is being charged on the selling side, and who's paying it, right? So the second concern related to is the buyer's agent just going to make less? Is the seller going to pay that commission, right? That's where the concern came from. So my spoiler here is after 6 months of information, there's two really good news pieces of information for you all. Number one is that commission in our marketplace is not going down. I'm not making any predictions or guarantees about what happens in the future, right? There's always a possibility that downward pressure on commission takes notable effect at some point in time. But number one piece of good news, the settlement does not appear to have negatively impacted the amount of money that realtors are earning in our marketplace. Okay, that's number one. Number two, our company, and I'm not surprised by this, our company is notably outperforming the marketplace in terms of both value provided and value earned from consumers. So I'm going to highlight here, if you take a look at the kind of big box that I have in gray, that is post-settlement commission data. The first couple rows there where it says average list side, average buy side, and total commission. That is the summary of information from, again, per month between 100 and 150 transactions that we were not involved in. Okay, and so it's summed down here at the bottom where you see list side commission, buy side commission, other agents right here. So generally speaking, over the last 6 months, in our marketplace, this is 745 deals. This is not an anecdotal small sample size. This is a lot of transactions. I think a pretty good illustration of the market. Both agents are earning just shy of 2.5% for a total of 4.9, with 4.81% of that being paid by the seller. So I think this is really good information when you're talking both with your buyer clients and your seller clients about setting expectations, right? You don't have to make a prediction or guarantee about what's going to happen in a certain transaction with them. You could say, hey, my brokerage has been compiling information in our marketplace since August 1st. Now with over 700 transactions summarized, just over 98%. This is this 98.07 right here. You could say to a seller, in those over 700 deals, just over 98% of the dollars paid in commission were paid by the seller. Matter of fact, even perhaps more encouraging than that is that 99.5% of the transaction that closed, at least some of the dollars were paid by the seller. Right, so the dollars that were paid by the buyer directly to their agent, even when the buyer paid their agent directly, most of the time they were not paying all of the money that their agent was earning. Okay, so that's the good news. Number one, that total of 5%, by my experience and research, that has been our effective market average for quite some time. I'm going to give a little note here, just as a reminder, to those of you that haven't taken your license class in a long time. Be very, very cautious in what you say to a client about market average commissions, right? So this information is totally fine for us to discuss as brokers. We're all in the same company. right? We're not talking about setting prices. We're not talking about market norms as a means to fix prices. So let's be really clear about that. We are allowed to understand what value is being provided and what value is being charged generally in the market. So this research is totally legitimate. What you can't do is then take this and go to your client and say things like, oh yeah, the going rate is that people are paying 5%. Going rate, no. Right? That's a term you don't want to say to a client because you're intentionally or unintentionally implying to them this is just the price. There is no price, right? It's totally between the two of you. My purpose in demonstrating this, number one, is that the settlement in our market, at least, does not appear to have applied enough downward pressure to change the value proposition between clients and realtors. Okay. Second piece of information here. The second piece of good news is how we're comparing to the marketplace. And again, I'm not surprised by this. I think this has been the case for quite some time, but I believe that the settlement actually improved the value that you're able to provide and therefore receive from your clients. So I want you to take a look here at this column B, our agents, in comparison to the other agents. So this also goes back to the same period of time, August 1st. We would have closed a little over 800 transactions since then. So a similarly large sample size, right? This isn't a couple deals. Our average list side commission since August 1st is 2.69. Our average buy side is 2.75 for a total of 5.4. So what that means here in column D, our agents are earning on average 11% more than the marketplace. I'm not surprised by that. We're full service, right? We have a better than average realtor, notably better than average in my opinion. We talk a lot about value, not price. And y'all see this. You do transactions with agents that just simply don't do as good of a job as you. I'm proud of that. I think you should be proud of that. And the numbers bear that out. A little subset of that information that I think is really interesting is note where are we outperforming the marketplace the most? It's on the buy side. If there was a piece of data that might validate a lot of the great work that Megan did over last summer, I think this is it. We've talked about it. November, y'all might remember November was a month where we didn't set our company buy side commission record, but in November, our average buy side commission was the highest it had been in something like 5 years. You see it right here. The average buy side commission that we've had over the last 6 months is at 2.75, which means the significant majority of our transactions on the buy side are closing at 3%. Y'all are having these conversations well with your buyers. You're getting the seller to pay the commission in 99% of the circumstances. And you're outperforming the marketplace by 13% in terms of what you're earning on the buy side. Now, I want to be clear. This isn't simply because you're better at negotiating with your client. That's not how these marketplaces work, right? I think many of you are good negotiators. I think this is because you view the job of a realtor to be about providing value, not competing solely on price. So I'm proud of this. I think y'all should be as well. Where I'm going to stop my screen share here. Where I think this applies in conversations with clients, just to kind of bring it down to like the granular, like, okay, in my day-to-day, what impact does this have? Well, impact number one is in conversations with your seller and your buyer, the marketplace continues to demonstrate that if you provide really good value, the consumer will pay you for it. That's number one. That didn't change, both in our marketplace and in our company. That has not changed. So if you provide really good value, the consumer will pay you for it. The second thing is, I think it ought to release any remnant of fear in the conversation about commission with your buyers. Right? The fact that we're outperforming the market by 13%, we're earning 2.75% on average in deals with buyers over the last 6 months, and that 98.5% of the time, the dollar that is getting paid to the buyer's agent is getting paid by the seller. Right? It's not a guarantee. Yes, you could run into a situation where you had a seller that for whatever reason was refusing, and you had to figure out the mechanics of the deal. But this information says that's going to so far and few between be the exception. I think it gives you a lot of confidence in that conversation, not to guarantee to your buyer the seller is going to pay it, but to say, hey, here's what the information is. We have 6 months of data now. So I'm so convinced that these numbers are so consistent. Good news for those of you that I think a couple months ago we got some feedback on This Week This Morning that was like, hey, maybe let's just talk less about commission and move on from that. I love that. I appreciate the feedback. 6 months of consistent information has me convinced that we're moving on from commission. I will probably circle back to this at some point in time. I'm going to continue to take a look at it at least until we get to the 1-year anniversary in August. But unless I see something of note, I'm probably not going to circle back to this until we get to August. So we'll take a look at what 12 months of information has, but I would just say fantastic work in providing value and making the conversation about value instead of price, which is what all the market research indicates your consumers want, is value. So love that the numbers are proving this out. Proud of you all for that work. That's all we have for today. Thanks everybody for joining. As always, question from tech, from what Rosie has shared, anything about rules in the marketplace from what Megan shared, any market stuff, always feel free to reach out. We'd love to chat with you about it. Just shoot any of us a text or a phone call anytime. Y'all have a great Wednesday.